Ask the minister here, Reverend Cindy Duran, to come and open our time with prayer. It's all yours.
Thank you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you just thankful to be gathered here today, gathered on your campus, in your house, and we give you thanks for each person who is here and the families that they represent. We ask for safe travels and for lots of good stories and fellowship tonight, just knowing that you and your heavenly host will be right here present with us, Lord. And we will be sure to give you all the honor and glory for all the good that comes out of this evening. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Before Keith introduces John, I want to tell you, when I was a boy, I loved baseball. My job in the neighborhood was to go get everybody together, you know. Two stories grew out of that. Mr. Rosser was the Lufkin Industries photographer. Sometimes Harold Nelson and Robert would be grounded, so we'd have to play in their backyard. So one of those big bars, boys like Mike Gibson or Mickey Chumley would hit it over Moody Street into Mr. Rosser's garden. I never got that ball back. Okay, he didn't want us going in his vines, and so years later we moved over to that neighborhood in one of my dad's rent houses, and my girls became fast friends with this old man. And I was thinking, is this the same old man that kept my baseball? You know, it cost me $2 every time that happened, you know. Well, I collected baseball cards, and a lot of my cousins down in Houston gave me their old ones when they quit. And about 19 years ago, I had those appraised, and I had about 3,000 or 4,000 of them, and they were appraised at $13,000. So I estimate I have $40 invested in those cards. So I will never have another investment like that. When we lived in Pennsylvania, we went to a baseball card show, my girls and I had two rookie cards of Carl Yastrzemski. I had paid a penny for both of those cards, and they were worth $350. Well, one more story, and then I'm going to let Keith go. I bought all my cards at Elvin Dice's dad's store across from where Wagon Wheel Barbecue was, Dice Grocery. And in 1960, I went down there to buy some baseball cards. I bought 2 packs. And as you know, they pre-mix those where you won't get too many of one kind. But the machine must have messed up because I bought 2 packs, 5 cards with 2 pieces of bubble gum, 10 cards, and 7 out of 10 of them were Willie Mays. You know, could not believe it. So anyway, but I know a lot of you guys here are baseball fanatics, probably much more than I could ever think of being one. And so anyway, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, who, if there's an Astros game on, I can forget getting him to a genealogical society meeting. It's no choice. He's going to watch the Astros game. So Keith, you're on.
You know that I tried to be a writer. I'm not really a speaker like Dickie. Dickie can get up in front of a group and go on and on and on and on until he puts everybody to sleep. I don't want to do that. I did prepare an introduction for John, and I was going to memorize it, and I didn't ever get to it because something kept coming up. So I'm just going to have to kind of read it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'd like for you to think back with me to a period about the 1940s, 1948 or so. When I was a boy, I was growing up in Lufkin. Hello. Okay. I was growing up in Lufkin, and some of the old-timers in the audience, such as, our speaker, John, and Robert Wood, were probably in diapers. That was when the nation was still celebrating the victory in World War II and celebrating the greatest generation. There weren't any baseball teams in Texas. The Astros wouldn't get here until 1962, and the Rangers got here after that. So there were no major league teams west west of St. Louis. But there were little boys who followed famous baseball players, and that included me. For me, that meant listening to the radio. That meant taking my radio and listening to a guy named Harry Carey talk about the St. Louis Cardinals. He talked about Stan Musial, he talked about Red Schoendienst, and Robert, when he was here, grew up to help keep the Lufkin Panthers' dominance in state. I have to say something. When I wrote this, I put Herman Bates' name in here, and Herman's not here, so I have to put Robert. I'm substituting Robert instead. Where is Herman? Is he coming?
Who knows where he is?
All right. Anyway, Robert grew up to help keep the Lufkin Panthers in dominance in Texas high school baseball. And while he was trying to figure out how to hit a curveball, John came along in the youth leagues, and he was throwing fastballs that made everybody forget about the rest of the people. John won a full baseball scholarship to the University of Texas. Not too many people around here can make that statement. He was named the most valuable player in the Southwest Conference. I don't know anybody that can make that statement from Lufkin other than John. Meanwhile, he heard a call from the man upstairs, and that's the man upstairs, the real man upstairs, in capital letters. And he had committed, now John can correct me if I'm wrong on this, a lot of this is things that I've been told. But John heard a call from the man upstairs, and he had committed his life to become a Methodist minister. And meanwhile, John's pitching was so good, all of his baseball activities, his pitching was so good that some people in St. Louis heard about him. This is the only team, the closest team to Texas had heard about him. And one day, John supposedly, and this was told to me by my brothers, Dean and Gene, and some other people confirmed it, that John got a call from a guy in St. Louis named Stan Musial. And the story I got was, and that's a man upstairs, but he's not in capital letters like the one John picked. But anyway, he wanted John, I understand, to come and try out for the Cardinals or sign with the Cardinals or what. And John told future Hall of Famer Stan Musial no. He said, and this is what I've heard. He told Stan Musial that he had decided to be a Methodist minister and he was going to honor that commitment. John turned down Stan Musial. That was my guy when I was growing up that I followed all the time. He was the guy he was my favorite player, I'll put it that way. John turned him down. But the Cardinals, I understand, didn't take no for an answer. And a week or two later, John got a call from a guy named Red Schoendienst, who was Stan Musial's roommate on the road and his best friend. And I understand that Red Schoendienst tried to get John to come to St. Louis. John told Red Schoendienst no. He turned down a second Hall of Famer. He turned down Stan Musial. If my story is right, he turned down Stan Musial. He turned down Red Schoendienst. And John is going to be your speaker tonight. I'm going to go through some other things. He's your speaker tonight, and John still plays on God's team. Now this is a kind of a prepared background for John. It says, born at St. Joseph's Hospital in Houston in 1943, John's family moved to Lufkin in 1946, where he attended Central Elementary. Remember that? And Lufkin, that's where the Civic Center is now, right?
Central Ward.
It says Central Elementary.
Central Ward Elementary.
Okay, that's okay. Central Ward and Lufkin Junior High, graduating from Lufkin High School in 1961 as a member of the Pony League National Champions and the Pony Grad Colt League National Champions and the 1960 Lufkin Nacogdoches American Legion State Champions. Baseball was a huge part of growing up in Lufkin. John was president of the LHS Lufkin High School 1961 senior class. He pitched on the Lufkin High School baseball team for 3 years, and he made All-State in 1961. And he played on the Lufkin High School basketball team his junior and senior year. By the way, John's records are in the library at Kurth Memorial now, thanks to a donation from Leroy Wilkinson's mother. Leroy died, I'm told, just a couple of weeks ago. But his mother, Leroy's mother, had made copies of some of John's records and his stories and so forth, and they're in the library at Kurth Library if you want to look at them. Okay, let's see. With a full baseball scholarship to the University of Texas, 1961 to 65, John was Southwest Conference MVP in 1965. Does anybody here know of anybody from Lufkin that was MVP of the Southwest Conference in anything? I don't. Anyway, I guess John's the only one. And then he graduated from SMU with a master's in theology in 1969. So he is playing on God's team. During the past 50 years, he spent 8 years in campus ministry at Tulsa University, 2 years at Rice University for a master's, where he studied ethics and religious studies, 27 years at Methodist churches in Tulsa, and West University in Houston. In the last 13 years as executive director for an organization called Caring Friends Incorporated. That's a nonprofit urban ministry in Houston which works collaboratively with those responding to the at-risk. He and wife Polly, is Polly here? That's Polly right there. He and wife Polly count 10 grandchildren, which I can't believe. 10 grandchildren with 4 living in Clear Lake, Houston, Southside Place, West University, Portland, Oregon, and Dayton, Ohio. John's childhood hobby, I heard some people talking about their baseball cards. John's childhood hobby of collecting sports cards continues, and the Astros, Rockets, and Texans get lots of attention. And so, our speaker tonight is John Calvin Collier.
You know what they say, when old folks gather together, we tell stories. Some of them might even be true. Some of those were true, and some of them were stretched a little bit. My first experience with Stan Musial was in college days, and Stan Musial was the keynote speaker in a college league up in the Illinois area. And I had never met Stan Musial, didn't know Stan Musial other than by sight, because I had a 1953 colored Bowman picture, a baseball card of Stan Musial, and that was my prize. I still have that card. Looks like dogs have gotten a hold of it about 10 times because I wore it out so much. And Stan Musial walked up to the podium. There were about 200 people, 8 clubs. I was a part of a club in Galesburg, Illinois. He walked up to the podium and just surprised the living heck out of me, because he said, before we eat, John Collier, will you offer a prayer? Oh my goodness, I was really, really shy. I had no idea, any idea that was coming. And I was sitting next to my roommate, who was from Notre Dame, because all the players were from different colleges. And so I kind of stuttered a little bit and said a quick blessing. And I sat down, and this Notre Dame kid said, okay, where's your notes? I said, what notes? He said, no, where's your notes? He says, Catholics, we have notes on prayer. you gotta read those prayers. I said, well, you can see it by my stuttering. But that was my first introduction to Stan Musial, and what a time. Just a few months later, the reference when the Red Shindigs called, and I said, you know, as much as I could, he kind of floated an idea about, he said, Bob Gibson is going to pitch against Sandy Koufax. Fly up St. Louis, watch him pitch, you can pitch on the sideline. I said, oh man, that is one temptation. Sandy Koufax and Bob Gibson, and I think that's one of the years Bob Gibson was having a phenomenal, super Hall of Fame year. But rather than say no, the reason that was given, I had to say no because I knew if I got on that plane at that time in the Southwest Conference, I wouldn't play my senior year, and I wanted to play my senior year. So it wasn't all altruistic. It was a little bit of concern if I got on that plane, that would be a problem. I'm going to do something tonight that's a little different. In fact, the first thing I hand out here, you're going to say, what in the world is this? I thought you were coming to speak. Well, I am, but I'm going to pass out something. Could y'all help me pass this out? I may not have enough. My faith may have been a little weak. I said, how many people come to a genealogy meeting on a weekday night? So if at least you can see. This is a sheet and of 1951 to 1963. Blank. So if you get it, you got the right sheet. Because the first topic that I put on when I kind of put out the article was Soaring Heights. Lufkin Youth Baseball, Soaring Heights, 1960 and 61. And I began to see when I was in college and afterwards, and certainly in the last 30 to 40 years, that you really need to have a perspective if you're going to understand the very context that you were in when you were 17, 18, and 19. And so just real quickly, I know this room is full of intellectuals, baseball intellectuals. As you look at this, take about a minute or two and see if you can name 1, 2, 3, or 4 events where there was a state championship, a runner-up, or a semifinal championship in any aspect of youth baseball, whether it's Little League, Pawnee Grad, high school, American Legion. And what year was that? Take a look at that real quickly and just kind of, and I want to ask you to kind of share your ignorance with us. This is something I'm hoping to have a little fun with. We'll just take a minute or two. For those who draw a blank on a blank page, hang with us, because this is the context out of which I believe the term soaring heights is really important, certainly important to me. And I think if we don't recognize where we have come from in certain events and certain things that happen in our life, we may not really see it as clearly as we should see it. So I'm going to start with 1951. Anybody know anything about Lufkin and baseball in 1951? That was the year, anybody? That was the year Pete Runnels signed a Major League contract, 1951. And I think, Roger, you talked with Mr. McKay and maybe about Lufkin baseball actually starting in 48 and Lufkin High School didn't even get in the FANG or the Panther yearbook. And so you think about Lufkin High School baseball not even being present in most of the 40s, and of course the war years were there as well. Yes?
Yeah, Doc Curry was the coach in 19.
Doc Curry was the coach. Yeah. But think about Pete Runnels signing in 1951. In 52 and 53, something happened that took Lufkin, a team from Lufkin, to a national championship series. Anybody know what that was? Not Little League. It was Teener League. Teener League.
What year?
1952 and 1953. Lynn Bishop, Jerry Merriman, Billy Kennedy, Biff Perdue, a whole host of Ronnie Pat Durham. He may have been 13 at the time, I'm not sure. But literally, and Mike's father, Ted Mayberry, was the coach and the manager. Mike, you weren't even born, I don't guess. Were you born?
46.
You were born in 46. You just look young. You just look young. So Ted Mayberry couldn't go, handed it off to another gentleman to go. But think about that. 52 and 53, Lufkin, Texas, starting basically an experience of Little League, sends two teams, 52 and 53, to a national championship in Pennsylvania. What about 50? Anything else in 53? Anybody remember anything else about 1953? Does the name Tommy Fleming or David Skinner? Anybody remember those?
Yeah, I remember that. Good.
Tommy Fleming in 53, if my memory and my research is correct, and I certainly could stand to be corrected, pitched against Ray Culp in Austin and won the right to go to Little Rock for the regional championship of Little League in 1953. Ray Culp later was a Major League Baseball pitcher for several years. But think about it, 52 and 53, Lufkin comes on to the stage of major championships. Wins the state championship, goes in Little League, goes to 53, and that's the beginning of, I think, a significant thing. 1956. Anybody know what happens in 56? 56. The same group of guys in 52 and 53 that go to the Teener League, 56, they actually are runner-up state American Legion champion. Runner-up. But remember what that is. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of American Legion teams across the country. Lufkin, in the state of Texas, lots of Legion teams, is literally the runner-up state champions. What about 1957? What happened in 1957? Pony League World Series. Jerry Register. I still think that Jerry Register, this is just opinion, Jerry Bates and lots of others can have other ideas. I think Jerry was one of the great 14-year-old players ever to play Pony League. Not only because of his hitting, which was phenomenal, not because of his base stealing, that's for sure, but because of his hitting and pitching. And when you pitch after you have caught the game before, that's no small feat. Jerry was a man among boys in some way as far as hitting. But not only the 57 Pony Leaguers, something else happened in 57 in Lufkin baseball. Remember, these are Lufkin youth baseball teams appearing on the national stage in different venues. 1957, the same group that was in 56 was runner-up. They won the American Legion State Champion in 1957. And you think about this. Little League barely being launched in the early 50s, and Lufkin's name keeps showing up in these state championships and national championships. What about 1959? What happened in 59?
Pony Grad.
Pony Grad. Got a scholar over here.
No, I just remember.
You've always had a great memory. And by the way, John David Scooter was a clear, popular guy at Central Ward Elementary. No doubt about it. He was a famous, I didn't say infamous, I said he was a famous guy. 59, so look again. In 57, we knew there were 3,600 teams. 57, 3,600 teams, Pony League teams. And 59, not quite as many, but Lufkin Youth Baseball is showing up on the radar. What about 1960? What happened in 1960?
I think I'm right about this. A Lufkin native, Pete Ronalds, won the American League batting championship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The man gets a prize. 1960, Pete Runnels wins the American League batting title and wins it again, as you see in 1962. And in between,
Who does he beat?
actually Ted Williams is on the team, and in 62, I think I'm correct on that, Williams beats him by 6 points. So it's amazing. Lufkin is showing up out of youth baseball and the history of connection to Lufkin, Texas in multiple ways. And then in 1960, Lufkin Nacogdoches, and the Nacogdoches likes to say Nacogdoches Lufkin, but we like to say Lufkin Nacogdoches, showed up in the state tournament in Fort Worth, and the Bombers, we won the state championship in American Legion in 1960. Half and half. Jerry, were you on that team?
In what?
No, in Lufkin Nacogdoches. I couldn't
Herman
remember.
was.
Couldn't remember if you were or not.
Yeah, Herman.
Herman wasn't on that team.
I don't
That was.
remember.
And in
I was there.
And in 1961, we made it to the state tournament. Did not win.
Whoa.
Was third place, and I'll talk about that.
Tell them who the hitter was on the other.
Talk
team.
about it. That's another story. That's down a little further down. So why do I start with, if my job is to, or challenge, is talk about 60-61 baseball? It's because if you take a look at the context out of Lufkin baseball, Lufkin youth baseball, the 1950s were a phenomenal, in my opinion, they were phenomenal moments where people like Jerry and Sandy's father, Mike and Malcolm Still's father, Q Boykin's father, Ted Mayberry, perhaps one of the most significant of all of them because he really helped launch Lufkin youth baseball. And you can name on and on and on. Otto Skinner. Anybody want to name some other names?
Bud Wood.
Frank Medford. Rankin Weatherby.
Rankin Weatherby, Pitzer Garrison, all kinds
Bud
of.
Wood was in there too.
And so when you think about when you think about how do we identify and understand where we've come from because of where we reached. And I want to tell you, the older I get, the more I appreciate the depth of commitment of people who worked at the foundry and the paper mill and stores, getting off of work, and oftentimes, does anybody remember actually raking the infield ourselves, picking grass, and you think about
Glenn Berry, you show up with
Glenn Berry, yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, and so where did we come from, and what was the evidence of what was being given birth to in Lufkin, Texas youth baseball was really something phenomenal. And that kind of launched me into say, you know, somehow we need to appreciate those fathers and mothers that gave birth to something really spectacular. I'd like to, I'm not the one to do this, but I'd like to see if in the history of the Lufkin and our East Texas contact, was any other city even come close to giving birth to that kind of vitality of baseball? I seriously doubt it. So in 1960, how are we doing for time? What do we need?
Oh, we're good, we're good.
Okay, well you stop me.
Oh.
I just got started, but you can stop me. You can stop me anytime. So if I switch to basketball, I'm going to read off the names of people on a 1960 basketball team, and I'm going to cover basketball real quickly. Leroy Wilkinson. If I read their name off, if you remember them, would you just raise your hand? Leroy Wilkinson, Hayden Russell, Dennis Marshall, John Walker, Mike Seago. Some of y'all are old. Jerry Bob Register, Joel Dillahunty.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Joel is still around, I think.
Joel's
Yeah.
there.
Billy Allen, he's back. And so in the 1960 basketball team, we had several members of some baseball teams that were participating in the. Here's what I thought was rather significant about the 1960 basketball team, Lufkin High School. We had no height. Joel was clearly the tallest guy, 6'2". And I'll never forget that for months, now Jerry Bob Redford and I we have a controversy about this, and I can guarantee it wasn't Jerry Bob that was trying to dunk. You know, I used to tell Jerry Bob, stand on your toes. We've now defined your vertical leap. That's it. But we would sometimes in that team, it's extraordinary, would have a 5 rotation guard. 5 guards out on the floor. Now you can't even imagine that today. And none of us could jump. None of us could dunk the ball. Now it was even sometimes illegal to dunk the ball. We would try and practice. So we were short, kind of enthusiastic, but really not great basketball players. Hayden Russell, you remember Hayden? Came over from Huntington. In 1960, after he left Huntington, and we would rib him about this, our team played Huntington. We got beat 30 points by Huntington. We say, you should have stayed in Huntington, Hayden. You should have stayed in Huntington. Hayden eventually, he made all-district. And at the same time, what we discovered is if you have heart and you have teamwork and you split your gut, you can still achieve something. You're not the greatest in the world, but you can still achieve something. And we won district. It was kind of amazing. We got beat by Frankston. We got beat by Center. We got beat by A and 2A teams. And yet somehow, Longview, John Tyler, Texarkana, we won the district. Got slammed in the by-district up against the guys 6'7" or 6'6" or 6'7". But I remember thinking, if you have heart and you have drive, and that's part of what was coming through even from Lufkin baseball, because a lot of times the 5 players on the court, on the basketball court, were players that had played with us in these different teams. If you have heart and you have drive, you can accomplish more than probably what you expected. So in 1960, transferring again to 1960 American Legion team. One of the things that happened that was very impactful for me, I call it a Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhic, Pyrrhic. A Pyrrhic victory is kind of a strange kind of victory. In some sense, it's a great victory. In another sense, it's a terrible victory. And I experienced something myself. We were playing for the state championship in Fort Worth with the Nacogdoches, 5 Nacogdoches players and 5 or 6 Lufkin players. Leroy Wilkinson, Paul Bookie Tucker. Y'all remember Paul Tucker? Yeah. Central. Jerry Bob, Billy Carr, etc. And we had to win. We had lost one of the games in the double elimination tournament. We had to win 2 games on the same night in order to overcome this team to win the state championship. I pitched the first game, not particularly a great game. We won. I gave up 4 or 5 hits in 9-inning games. And then back to back, we played a second game. And Larry Frank who was a University of Texas basketball player and on the team, Nacogdoches Lufkin team, was a pitcher, and he pitched probably a third of our Legion games. He pitched the first game. I pitched the first game. He started the second game. And about the 5th inning, he said, you know, I've only had a day or 2 rest. I am just totally wiped out. I had pitched the first game 9 innings, and he said, John, you're on. I said, I don't know how much I've got left in my tank, but it's not a lot. And I remember thinking, how did Walter Johnson do it? Walter Johnson. I never forget this. My coach in college was Bibb Falk. He played in the 20s and played during the time of Walter Johnson. He said, Lefty, he called everybody Lefty. Lefty, you need to be like Walter Johnson. Coach, what did Walter Johnson do? Walter Johnson, in one 5-day period, threw 3 shutouts against the New York Yankees, 9 innings each game. 3 shutouts, 9 innings in 5 days. Yeah, he took a day off. One of those days he took a day off. He said he got a rubber arm. I was thinking out in the bullpen where they were calling me in the beginning of the 6th inning. I pitched 9 innings. My arm felt like rubber. And I said, how in the world? But you know that because of the history and the context of Lufkin baseball, you know that you give it all you have every inning, and you go out with a blaze of glory. Whatever it is, you give it all you got. The first inning, I did fairly well. At least I got the ball over the plate. But by the 11th inning, my arm was just so, thank goodness, Oliver Thornton, the manager of our 1957, he said, John, sometimes you got to throw overhand, sometimes you got to throw 3/4, sometimes you have to throw sidearm, and sometimes you have to throw underhand, submarine. I told my catcher, boys, this is a submarine inning. This is the submarine inning. I'm hoping and praying that I can get the ball over submarine style. After 13 innings, we win the game, and very excited, wonderful, wonderful time. We're going to the regional championship, where eventually we played Rusty Staub as a 16-year-old Astros guy. And Rusty Staub and his team from New Orleans, they were a great team. But eventually, they went on, they won the American Legion Championship, sent us, Lufkin Nacogdoches, sent us a telegram at the end of winning the American Legion World Series, saying, we played the championship against Lufkin Nacogdoches. Because we won 5-4, they won 5-4, and then they won. But I thought, well, at least we accomplished the game. But what about the Pyrrhic part of the victory? We won the victory. We went to play a great team, had a great Well, what about, literally, I thought a week later, after that August 11th game, I thought I was never going to pitch again. For 1 week, I literally could not brush my teeth. My arm was so spent and so painful, I couldn't lift it. My rotator cuff, my elbow, and I thought, you know, sometimes you got to have some common sense as well as just heart. You got to have some common sense. I knew that because my family was going through a financial difficulty, real financial difficulty, I needed a scholarship. And I thought, yeah, we stepped up, we did it, but was that the definition of a Pyrrhic victory? That you should have had more sense than to ruin your arm and ruin your future. And of course, eventually getting a University of Texas scholarship was a huge blessing for me. So 1961, when we got to the state tournament, that was our crushing defeat. Because if you saw, could you hand these out? Can you hand these out for us? I've got 7 minutes to. 7 minutes to.
No, we're not watching.
Okay, all right. Well, I can be boring if you don't believe me. Just ask my wife over here. She'll remind me of that. But there's a sense in which we came into that season. Remember, the guys who were on this 1961 team, many of them have been a part of state championships, of national championships, down through the years from an early age, and had watched our peers and those above us, like Tommy Fleming, like Lynn Bishop, like Jerry Merriman, all these guys that had come before us, we knew that in order to win, you got to believe in yourself. And we had had success, and we had overcome again and again. Roger Johnson was on that team, and a very important part of that team. And as we went off to the state tournament, we had literally one of the best records of baseball in Lufkin High School at that time, only to be superseded by the state champions in the next couple of years, sitting on the back, some of the guys sitting on the back row. So when we got to Austin, I knew that Bibb Falk, my coach at Texas, I was hoping to go to Texas, was sitting behind home plate. He let me know that. David Skinner was there. He said, "Hope you have a good game, son. This is important." Hope we have a good game, Coach. Yeah, this is very important. And we were playing Lubbock Monterey, and we were going into the last inning, ahead 3-2. Bibb Falk, I actually saw him leave. He left in the last inning. And what happened, and Jerry Bate was there. Jerry, you were.
Yeah, I remember, it was a ground ball on third base, Ronnie Red. It hit a rock in the.
That was first base. Yeah, it hit a rock. The first guy that got on with a Texas leaguer, he was the worst hitter on their team. I guarantee you that guy, I think he might have been hitting 120. He hit a Texas leaguer that just barely got over the shortstop because we were playing him in because he was a terrible hitter. Next guy up hits a 15 to 18 foot, about 70 feet, just high into there, just off the tip of off the end of his bat. He hits it up like this. I go for it. Bill Berry's on second base. He comes in. It's about 70 foot. You know, here you got 90 foot bases and 60 foot pitching. And the ball is spinning so hard. Denny Marshall's coming from first base. Ball's hitting so hard, it spins like that and goes to the side. Now we got a runner on first and third. 2 outs. Next guy up hits a ground ball. This is what Jerry's referring to. A ground ball to Dennis Marshall on first base. Dennis, we think 3 outs, we're in. The ball hits a rock. We used to have that rock. We used to have that rock at Lufkin High School. That rock was there right in front. Hit that rock, bounces over Denny's head. Those 2 run scores, and they win 4-3. That was a crushing defeat. I mean, when you are primed and you see a team, and it's a team effort, you got to have 9 players out there. When you're won 20 games and lost 1, and you see that it takes every one of those players to win a game, because you win some close games and tough games, and you are headed to what you hope to be the first state title in Lufkin baseball history, and you think you have a real chance. When we walked off the field that night, that was a crushing defeat. And I began to think later on, you know, there's a sense in which baseball provides you, maybe like other sports, but certainly in a very poignant way. It gives you a chance to grow up, to be a man. How do you come back from a crushing defeat? How do you come back? How do you learn from a Pyrrhic victory, where common sense perhaps was not quite connected in a way that we could be in your own best interest, and yet at the same time appreciate the history of the 50s that literally nourished you, one team, one year, one decade after the next, to even give you the possibility of thinking that you could win against other highly competitive folks. I'll close with this story, then we'll have some questions. Sometimes you look back and you say, there are certain events that occur that may in themselves be relatively superfluous. You can't say that they made a huge difference. I can say, excuse me, I can say that this incident was a huge factor, baseball-wise, in my life. It was 19, when we were 13, the last pitch I pitched in Alexandria, Louisiana, the All-Star team when I was 13. A guy from Henderson, Lee Hensley, hit the ball so hard. John Davis on first base, I thought it broke his hand. That was my memory of me as a pitcher when I was 13. So when I was 14, I thought, I hope we have a good team. I hope we get past Diboll. Maybe we'll get past Groveton. Oh my goodness, maybe we'll, I don't know. What can we get past? I don't even know if I'm going to be on the All-Star team. But I'm selected in the All-Star team. It's been raining that day out in Teeter Park. And I'm walking out, and Teeter Park, there's mud puddles everywhere. And Q Boykin's there, C.D. Boykin. He was a coach. Q was one of my best friends. His father put his arm around me. We were walking out. Never forget this. And he said, John Collier, this year, you are going to be the best 14-year-old pitcher in the state of Texas. And I stepped in the middle of a mud puddle. It was so shocking to me. I didn't even know that I would pitch for the All-Star team. Much less be the best in Angelina County. Much less be the best. That was so shocking and startling to me that when I got home, I thought, what does it take for me to be better than I am? What does it take for you to rise above where you think you are and become something more than you think you are? And that launched my mental image of how you think about yourself and how you think about putting your gifts and skills together in a way that believes in yourself when you don't believe in yourself. And I'll never forget going back to Mr. Boykin and said, Mr. Boykin, you said something to me that's really important. And I said, I have a question for you. How do I get better? How do I get better? Well, Mr. Boykin had some answers. He said, John, I watched you pitch since you were 9, which I had. I've been pitching since I was 9. He said, you throw way too many curveballs. I said, that's because I don't have a great fastball. You don't have a great fastball, you throw a lot of curveballs. Yeah, but I can tell when you start, there are certain curveballs you throw that you can't control. And you get in trouble because you walk people. You just need to spot your fastball, use 2 or 3 different curveballs, and use a changeup. And let me tell you, if you can master 3 pitches, you will go a long way as a pitcher. Get rid of all this other stuff and just focus upon 3 pitches that you can control and watch what happens. And so I told C.D. Boykin one time, you were probably a really essential part of my getting a scholarship when I needed it from my family at the University of Texas. Because when someone believes in you and then shows you how you can get better, and you come out of a culture of people being driven to be more than they are, wow, is that a gift or what? So with that, soaring heights because of the people who brung us. Darrell Roy said you danced with who brung you? Well, let me tell you, 1960, 61, I began to realize we were dancing with all of those folks in the past who had helped bring us to where we were. And then a Pyrrhic victory, common sense, and then discovering that people who believe in you can really lift you beyond. Thank you very much. Lots of other stories, but appreciate people coming out to a genealogical society on a Monday night at 6 o'clock. That in itself makes you legendary folks. So thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to you, and if you have any questions, or if you think, I'm not sure about your time. So.
Does anyone have any questions?
I do. What
I don't remember the year or anything. I remember playing in Corpus Christi, and you were down there. The first time I'd ever seen a black boy playing. And he pitched. And I remember we won.
Jerry knocked him off
Huh?
the bounce
Yeah,
scooter
Jerry
about
hit him. I mean,
450.
yeah, he
We
went
won
down,
that
but
baseball game.
he came back.
Throwing about
Oh, go
90
ahead.
miles an hour.
Go ahead.
Huh? He was throwing about 90 miles an hour, there's no way he was
Yeah.
gonna win.
Okay.
Jerry caught one, and he right in the stomach, and
Right.
carted him off. We ended up winning the baseball game.
Where was that?
But, well,
Sandy, you got a
Go
good
ahead.
memory. You got a good
Hey,
memory.
I was following y'all right
but,
along.
okay, yeah, but here's what happened that I've got, and it might be completely out. We won, and that was a state something, Teener League or something. We came and played at what was it? Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. Anyway, there was a 4-state to play. Arkansas couldn't go, but they had collected the money. Something had happened to their team. So they gave it to the second place team, the people we beat in Corpus Christi, and we played, I think it was in Lufkin. And that same guy came up here and beat us. Now, does that sound right?
You know,
Wrong.
I'm gonna have to defer to Jerry on this. I'm blanking on that,
I don't know about the after, I do remember the game in Corpus.
Oh, I remember the one in Corpus, because I remember Jerry Bob registered, and I know he had a long homework. But I remember people would come out and they would sit in their chairs behind the fence. The fence was behind it was people's backyards. And they would come out, and that was Corpus Christi College or something like that.
Yeah.
And they'd come out and watch the game. He hit one completely over their house into the street. I have never seen one.
Yeah, Jerry.
I got one memory about Jerry Bob Rescue. Pascal, Fort Worth, we went up there, and, when you go to Pascal, Fort Worth, they spit on you in the dugout and everything else. They were a rough town to play in. And they had a center field with no fence. It was open out there. No fence at all. And there was a telephone pole in the middle of the center field. And I asked somebody and said, well, somebody's gonna get hurt chasing a foul ball near that telephone pole. They said, well, nobody's ever hit one that far. Jerry Bob Register bounced one off that pole and made a home run inside the park, home run.
And he is slow as a camel.
He
Long way.
made a home run, and he hit one off that pole. I'll never forget that.
And I'll certainly never forget it myself, and I'll testify that's the longest one that I've seen many that he.
It was amazing. Mike, you have a comment?
David Skinner gave me some pictures that he had years ago. And the one thing that really stood out, and I thought it was 1952, when they built the Little League ballpark over there where the library sits right now, the home plate was almost exactly where the atrium is when you step into the library. That was where home plate was. But that little stadium, which we moved later on, they called it Old Blue over in Teener. That little stadium was like a little Yankee stadium. And all the merchants coveted every little piece on the board, of the fence, to have it, the hardware stores, the whatever, you know, it was all decked out. But what really struck me was that in this picture, of course, the kids wearing one of those little helmets, just like ears and they'll strap across the top. And all the fans are in double-breasted suits in their Elliott Ness hats. You know, like my dad used to wear. They're dressed up. When Little League would play in 1952, the nights they played, everything was shut down in Lufkin. Everybody showed up to watch Little League and support. So what you're talking about, the heart of Lufkin and the love of baseball got entrenched in these fathers and mothers in the early 50s, and it just...
It's amazing.
You couldn't
And you
stop.
know, and then you go from there, and one of the projects I hope, and Roger's been really helpful with this, and is that somehow we can piece together Lufkin baseball from the 50s to the present, because obviously two national championships of Western Little League, of Lufkin Little League is really an amazing thing, kind of bookends to what happened. I'll close with one more story because this is a Houston Lufkin story. When we won the first 2 games in 1957 at a tournament in Houston, it was perhaps also the 2 games that really convinced us that we could win, because we were reading the Houston Post. First guy up, you know, we know his name because they're in the Houston Post every Sunday, hitting .395. That's the lowest batting average on the team. The next guy hitting .450. The next guy hitting .570. Said, "Oh my goodness, what in the world? How are we going to possibly compete against this team?" So when we won the first 2 games, and we're getting ready to play the 3rd game against the team that we just beat, that team happens to be the father of the pitcher, had called National Little League and says, "We can't play the game tomorrow." We said, "Why not?" That's when the game's scheduled. And the primary pitcher couldn't pitch because he had just pitched the day before. Because it looks like it might rain. It might rain. Oh yeah, that's a good one. It might rain. And they got the National Pony League to agree to put the game off another day. We said, "Oh, this is incredible." Now that's just the start of the story, because when we beat them the 2nd time, and then the tournament, and we're on our way to Lubbock, this is what happened. My father was the president of, in 1957, of the Pony League. He was approached at home plate after the game by the team that we had beaten twice with these words: "Mr. Collier, you know you're not going to win another game. You know that our team is much better than your team. We need to go to Lubbock." My father said, "Well, I'm sure I can't repeat what he said." "You have got to be kidding. We just beat you twice, and we beat your best pitcher both times, and you think you should go to Lubbock to represent?" And we thought, and my father came back and said, "I thought I'd heard everything until I heard that." And so my father did send a couple letters after we won the World Series and said the better team definitely went to Lubbock and to the World Series. I'm going to close with that. I know we're past our time.
I'm gonna say one more thing about that Houston team. They refused to give us the trophies.
Yeah,
We never got a trophy.
they refused to give them the trophies, which I thought was
They
just
refused to give it to us.
unbelievable. Thank you very much. I want to thank the leadership teams and Sandy. This is Sandy now. This is not, I'm ready to quit.
I trailed you guys by 8 years, and some 9, you know, Jerry was 8
Best
years.
bat boy we ever had.
And I just want to say that you guys were inspirational to the younger kids. Not because you won, but how you played the game. So,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I could say the same thing about the ones that came before me, and so it was truly a great thing. I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for being. We love to tell stories, and especially when it's about baseball. So thank you for sharing tonight.
John, I do have one question. I am under the impression, I have an interest in Pete Reynolds for an odd reason. My uncle delivered ice when they had ice boxes, and Pete Reynolds was his helper.
Was that the one out here on, just when I drove past?
On our game.
On Reggae,
Yeah,
probably
that was
crystallized or something.
That's the first
The
time I
Joneses, the
remember.
one the Joneses
Mr.
on?
Jones, yes.
Yeah.
The Joneses.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that's the first time I picked up a block of ice from a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question. I'm under the impression, and some of you guys can help me with this, that when Pete Reynolds went to high school, there was no high school baseball team. Is that true?
All
I
I know is that he was born in 28. If the first baseball team was in 48,
Well, they had a gap.
Yeah,
They had a
he
gap.
probably had graduated the year before,
Yeah.
or 2 years before. So,
I think-
but I bet he played on the Foundry team or one of those Forester teams.
Yeah, I was writing, I was doing a paper on Maurice Frank, and I was reading either the Chronicle or the Post on microfilm, and I believe that in '47 he was at Stillwater, Oklahoma with a minor league team, but I'm not
It
completely
could have been, he
sure.
would have been 19, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure of
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
anyway.
There were some teams way back there. I was researching the 1919 White Sox, you know, the Black
Yeah,
Sox.
yeah. Mhm.
And there, in those papers, I saw some Lufkin baseball games. Lufkin was playing baseball.
Oh, they
back
were.
then.
There was a gap, a hiatus there
Yeah.
between when they had it and when they re-implemented.
Pitcher Garrison's group, when they played, I think he told me that their field was, home plate was kind of where the junior high auditorium.
Yeah, yeah. He may have played for the firemen.
I'm not
Lufkin
gonna
firemen
comment on
or
this, but
somebody
just-
like that, or
Just pass this
and my
out.
uncle Rip played with him. Rip Hensley. Yeah. You need to talk about.
No, I'm not gonna comment on it. I'm just saying, one of these days, I hope we can sketch together for 60, 70 years of Lufkin baseball, and this is something that Thematics is, I think, as well as the Diboll History Center and the Temple Foundation put together about Lufkin baseball, and you can see, we got quite a story to tell.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
One more question. Do we know exactly when Lufkin High School's first baseball team was?
No, the school district was founded in 1905, and the first football team was in 1911. I'm pretty sure of that.
But the baseball team was.
Rule Kimmy was on that team.
These want to know about baseball.
Baseball.
Yeah, baseball.
I don't-
Said that they didn't have they didn't play, it was 48 the first.
48, yeah. Dick McKay told us, he was on that team, and he thought Don Hearn was on that team too.
Well, I held a 1945 yearbook,
Was he? Yeah.
and there was no team.
I'm sorry, what?
Pete Rose was a junior. I have a 1945 yearbook.
You do?
My mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Anyway, 1945, Pete Rose was a junior at Lufkin.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. He was
Yeah.
17 at that time.
Now, you know, they only went until they were 16. They went 11 years back then, didn't they?
He played on the football team. The World War II was in there. World War II was in there.
And his name was Bonneau. It was the man's name. And so I remember I listened to that game. We didn't go to the game, but we listened to the game, and we were pretty close with his dad as a salesman. And when we won, my sister sent the guy a sympathy card. so she was very loyal to the Lufkin Panthers. So thank all of you for coming. There's a lot we could do with sports history, and we are going to do that. Now, what you don't know, that thing we passed around, I only copied one of those things that from Leroy Wilkinson's mother, but one of those, that one is the door prize. And the other one I will have to get done for you. So we're going to draw. John, if you'll come draw. If you'll come draw.